the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of Tunisia, the final selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. We're back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. This episode deals with the final selections for Tunisia. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of making the final squad. That was mostly based on their participation since the last World Cup, but we considered a few other factors as well. And actually, we ran out of time to do part 2 for some of the teams of the African Cup. So today we're going back to review that to complete the collection, as it were. The tournament then has been played by this point, but we're going to take the perspective of just before the tournament here, as if we were doing the mediacast when we intended to. So this mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information, including a look at games played prior to the Cup, the last few games they played. In Section 2, well, that's the main part of the mediacast. So we're going to review the preliminary and final rosters, the roster that was released, and we're going to compare that to the list that we compiled in Part 1. And then Section 3, we will summarize, reviewing surprise selections and non-selections, new players, and updating on any injuries. And we'll end with a revised version of our Spotlight review, our updated prediction of who we think are going to be the starters. Okay, let's jump right in, and we begin with some team information here. So teams are allowed to bring 27 players to this cup. Initially that was 23, but in mid-December they raised it to 27. Tunisia put together a 55-man preliminary squad, and so they will have to eliminate 28 of those to arrive at their final squad. In terms of games that Tunisia has played most recently, in November we had 2 World Cup qualifying games. We're not really interested in the score of those games, but we might as well mention it since we have that information. The first one was against Sao Tome and Principe. That was a 4-0 win. And the second was a loss, actually, to Malawi. That was in Malawi. 1-0 loss there, so a bit disappointing there. Then in January, 2 pre-tournament friendlies. Again, not interested in the scores, but we kind of hope that it'll give some indication of who the starting players are going to be. The first of those was against Mauritania and ended in a 0-0 draw. And the second was against Cape Verde, a 2-0 win to go into the Cup with on a good note. So we're going to look at those 4 games, the lineups, and hopefully that will inform as to who we can expect to start. All right, that's the end of part 1. Let's move on to section 2. And this, if you're watching on YouTube, is the list that we compiled in part 1, ranking players according to how likely they are to make the final squad here. So we begin with the manager, Jalal Kadri, and we'll get rid of the name of the previous manager who was on our list there, Jalal Kadri. And well, he wasn't fired or anything before the tournament, so we'll say that he was a selection for the final squad there, and move on to goalkeepers. So for goalkeepers, we had 2 definite candidates, Bashir Ben Said and Ayman Daman. We also had a likely goalkeeper or likely candidate in Muez Hassan, and then a possible but unlikely candidate in Moez Ben Sharifa. So let's see who made it. Bashir Ben Said was selected for the final squad, and so was the other definite candidate, Ayman Daman. Our likely candidate, Muez Hassan, also selected for the final squad. And unlike some teams that did bring 4 goalkeepers, Moez Ben Sharifa was not selected for the final squad. In fact, he was not even selected for the preliminary squad there. So a bit of a surprise there. We did have some new names come up. Actually, we had one very familiar name come back selected for the preliminary squad. We thought he was retired. Well, he was retired from international play after the World Cup and retired from club play in January, so we didn't expect to see him selected for the preliminary squad. That's Eamon Mathlouthi. Sorry if I left naming him too long there. Eamon Mathlouthi named to the preliminary squad, as well as three new names. So these won't figure in this cup, but they may come into play for the next cup. So that's Amanella Memish, and we won't give information on these players. We'll just introduce them by name, kind of name checking them before the name checking them here in case they show up next time. The second one, Arfawi Dries, making the preliminary squad, and then actually a name that we should have had on our list because he was on the roster for the 2021 African Cup, even though he saw no field time, but he had last played for the national team in March 2022. That's Ali Jamal, and he was named to the preliminary squad here. So it's good to know that he's kind of still in the mix here, and we might see him in the future. Okay, let's look at the recent games then. The 2 November games, the starting keeper for the first one was Ben Said, and actually for the second one there against Malawi too. And let's make a long story short, because it was Bashir Ben Said starting all games, the 2 November games and the 2 January game. So that is a pretty clear indication to us that he's going to be the starter. But we don't really have a sense of who the backup keeper is from that information. Anyway, let's move on to the central defense. And here we have 2 definite candidates. The first one is Montasar Talbi, and the second, Yassine Mariah. We have a likely candidate in Ala Gram. He's a newcomer. 2 possible candidates, Nadir Gandri and Dylan Braun. And then seemingly off the squad, Bilal Ifa, but we left him on the list here thinking he might have had a slim chance of making the squad. Normally we expect about 5 or 6 central defenders, so let's see who made it. Our 2 definite candidates, Montasar Talbi and Yassine Mariah, both of those selected for the final squad. The likely candidate, Ala Gram, also selected. And the first of our possible candidates, Nadir Gandri, only selected for the preliminary squad there. And the other possible candidate, Dylan Braun, not even selected for the preliminary squad. So he seems off the team, having been a starter in the 2022 World Cup. So Dylan Braun there. Off the team. Bilal Ifa also not selected for the preliminary squad even. And one new candidate, but only making the preliminary squad, it's Omar Rakik. And he also is actually returning, having been a substitute in the 2021 African Cup. So named to the preliminary squad, but not making the final squad. So very thin here in the back, just 3 central defenders named. So I'm guessing that we're going to see maybe more than 2 left or right backs who will fill in central defense. So let's move. Oh no, let's see who started. We might see even here some players, out of position players, filling in. So against Sao Tome and Principe, the first November game, it was a 4-3-3, so a two-man central defense, and it was the two definite candidates, Talbi and Mariah, in that game. And the same in the second November game. In the first January game, though, it is two different players, or actually Mariah is selected, but alongside Abdi, Ali Abdi playing. He is normally a left back. We're going to meet him right away here, but he's actually playing on the right side of the two-man central defense there. So as we thought, some other players maybe filling in, but again, not in the last game. It's once again that central pairing of Talbi and Mariah. So a very consistent central defense there. And well, you can probably guess that we're going to predict that those two, Talbi and Mariah, will be starters. But we'll do that in section 3 in the spotlight review, and we'll move on here to a left back position. Our first candidate is at the definite level, and we just met him playing out of position in central defense. That's Ali Abdi. And we also have two likely candidates here, Ali Malul and Usama Haddadi. And then one candidate at the possible level, Amin Shemi. So let's see who made it. Normally we expect 2, but I think here we're going to expect 3 because the central defense was kind of thin. Let's take a look. Ali Abdi, the definite candidate, was selected. And the first, or actually both likely candidates, Ali Malul and Usama Haddadi, both of those selected. And the possible candidate, Amin Shemi, only making the preliminary squad there, but not the final squad, and no new candidates in this position. So, as we said, 3 is maybe a lot of left backs to bring, but we saw Abdi as a backup, as a central defender. Let's see who actually played it as the left back, though. It was Ali Abdi in the first of the November games. In the second one, it was also Ali Abdi, but it seemed he and Kashrida, who we're going to meet soon as a right back, just switched positions there. So Ali Abdi again. In the third game, or the first January game, we saw Ali Abdi as a central defender. He actually switched positions with Montasar Talbi. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but Talbi playing as the left back, and Ali Abdi playing in central defense. So a very consistent squad here. Let's see if there's any change in the last game against Cape Verde. Actually, here we do see Ali Malul stepping in. So that kind of suggests he's the backup for the left back position there. Okay, let's move over to the right side. And we have a definite candidate in Wadi Kashrida. No candidates at the likely level, but then 3 at the possible level: Mohammed Drager, Jan Valeri, and Gaith Zalouni. So let's see who made it here. Wadi Kashrida, no surprise that he was selected for the squad. The first of our possible candidates, Mohammed Drager, only making it to the preliminary squad there. It's actually Jan Valari who made it to the final squad, and just 2 right backs selected here because Gaith Zalouni also just making it to the preliminary squad. So we have Wadi Kashrida and Jan Valari as right backs, and as I said, usually we expect 2 players in the position. Kashrida was the starter in the first of the November games, and in the second game we saw that he was also a starter, although he switched flanks with Ali Abdi. In the first of the January games, It was Kashrida. Well, in both of those games, Wadi Kashrida starting. So that brings us to the end of the defense. We're seeing very consistent selections in the starting positions there. So you can expect that when we get to the spotlight review, it's fairly straightforward. Okay, up to the midfield we go, and it's defensive midfielders. A bit of an unusual distribution here. No definite or likely candidates for defensive midfielders, but then we have 4 possible candidates. The first is Ferjani Sassi. Then we have Hussein Taka, Hamza Jalasi, and Haj Mahmoud. Those 4 players at the possible level, and then one possible but unlikely candidate in Mohamed Wael Durbali. Let's see who made it then. Our first possible candidate there, Ferjani Sassi, only making the preliminary squad, but the next 3 of them all made the final cut. That is Hussein Taka, that's spelled TKA, Hamza Jalasi, and Haj Mahmoud, all of them selected for the final squad. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Durbali, not even making the preliminary squad. Before we look at the games, we'll cover central midfielders too, since that often overlaps. And there we had 2 definite candidates in Asa Leidouni and Elias Skiri. No candidates at the likely level, but at the possible level, Anis Ben Slimani. And then finally, a player seemingly off the squad, Galen Chalali. So let's take a look at who made it. Our 2 definite candidates were selected for the final squad. That's Aisa Ludani and Elias Skiri. The possible candidate, Anis Ben Slimani, also selected for the squad, the final squad there. And Galen Chalali, the seemingly off the squad player, indeed seemingly off the squad because he was not even selected for the final, for the preliminary squad. We do have 2 new candidates here, although they only made the preliminary squad, but we'll put their names out. Sami Chucheni, a promising youngster there, named to the preliminary squad. And then a returning player, actually, the last tournament he played in was the 2018 World Cup. It's Ahmed Khalil, last played for the national team in 2019, but did appear on the bench in September 2020. That was his last appearance. So Ahmed Khalil making a comeback here, at least to the preliminary squad. So that is our central midfield lineup. Let's take a look. So 3 candidates coded as defensive midfielders: Hussein Taka, Hamza Jalasi, and Haj Muhammad. And then 3 coded as central midfielders: Aisa Ludani, Elias Skira, and Anis Ben Slimani. Now we can look at the games and see. We said that the first game was a 4-3-3 formation. That seems to be what Tunisia favors. And we have the 2 definite central midfielders, Skiri and Leidouni. And it's alongside him is Rafia, who we're going to meet a little bit later. He's usually, or he's coded as a more attacking player there. In the second game, it's actually a 4-4-2 formation, and we see Leidouni in the midfield. Skiri is on the field, but he's actually playing as a left winger here, and Ferjani Sassi is playing as a right winger. In the midfield is Sliti, who also a more attacking player who we're going to meet later. So we do have our 2 main candidates, Skiri and Leidouni, and this time Sassi getting a start, but as a right winger. In the first January game, Leidouni and Skiri again, and Ben Ramadan, we're going to meet him as a left attacking midfielder here, but here he's playing as a right midfielder in a 4-3-3 formation. And finally, the game against Cape Verde, we have Skiri. This time, Leiduni is not on the field as a starter, but we have Ben Slimani as well as Rafia in a 4-3-3 formation. So again, Rafia, more attacking player, but showing up twice in the midfield. So there we have it. Skiri playing all 3 games. Leiduni, all 4 games. Leiduni starting 3, and Ben Slimani starting 2 of them. Let's move to the next category, which is left midfielders and right midfielders. By the way, yes, left midfielders and right midfielders. Actually, we had no candidates here that even though Tunisia uses a 4-3-3 formation, most of the players in that position will be the players coded as defensive or central midfielders. However, we do have one new player to add to the list who's coded as a left midfielder, and not actually a new player, but another returning player. It's Ayman Ben Mohammed, and he last showed up in the African Cup 2019 tournament, and last appeared on the bench in November 2020. So yet another player kind of brought in from the cold, but interesting information for us in that they're kind of still in the mix to some degree. So Ayman Ben Mohammed, perhaps we will see him because he's now in his early 30s. Still young enough to appear in the next cup, I would say. Right midfielders, though, no new candidates to add and no candidates there in the first place. So we go upfield to the left winger / left attacking midfielders. This is the upper left quadrant of the field, depending on the formation. And we had no candidates at the definite level, but we had likely candidate Yusuf Msakni, and then 4 possible candidates, that is Naeem Sliti, who we saw playing in the central midfield, and Mohammed Ali Ben Ramadan, also we saw playing in the midfield. The other 2 are Saifala Latif and then Cresto. And we also have a possible but unlikely candidate in Elias Saad. So let's see who made it. We have Yusuf Msakni selected once again. He's 34 years old, but still making the cut. In fact, he's the captain once again. He's been the captain since the 2019 African Cup. Among the possible candidates, Naeem Sliti, the first of the 4, was selected for the final squad, and so was the second, Mohammed Ali Ben Romdain. Saifala Latif, also selected for the final squad, so that makes 4 over here. Cresto, on the other hand, not selected even for the preliminary squad. However, Elias Saad, our possible but unlikely candidate, did make the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. We also had a new candidate added to the preliminary squad. That is Bugera Usama. I've heard that name actually reversed as well, Usama Bagheera. So maybe next time around we'll have to look more carefully into that to see which name it actually is. Anyway, that would be a name possibly for the future there, because he only made the preliminary squad. And now let's look and see in the game. So 4-3-3 formation in their first game in November. So that makes it a left forward position, and it is Msakni there as the left forward. On the right forward side, we see another of our candidates here, Naeem Sliti. So he really got around the field here, because in the second game, that's where we saw him as a central midfielder, Sliti. The second game in November was a 4-4-2 formation, and in this case, Msakni was on the field, but playing as a forward or a co-forward there. First game in January, 4-3-3 formation. We're back to that, and Sakni not used in that one. It's actually Achuri, who we haven't met yet, but we'll meet him soon because he's a right winger playing as a left forward here. And we see Slitty again. So it looks like Slitty being selected a lot. He's playing as a right forward in a three-man forward line there. And finally, in the last game, the warm-up game with Cape Verde, Msakni again starting on the left. And yes, he's the only one of our candidates here. So there we go. That covers the left side. We see a bit of an overlap with the right side, but far fewer candidates here on the right. We only had no candidates at the definite or likely level, just at the possible level, Elias Ashuri, and then at the possible but unlikely level, Amor Leuni. So we'll just deal with this quickly. Elias Achuri did make the final squad there, even though just a possible candidate. Amor Leuni, the possible but unlikely candidate, not even making it to the preliminary squad. But we do have a new candidate on the list here, and it is Raki Aouni. So again, a name that we'll keep in our soccer files for next time around to see if he develops with the squad. Okay, let's go on to the forwards. We actually included kind of central attacking midfielders in the forward line here. So we're still kind of technically in the midfield here. And we had no definite candidates, but we had Hannibal Nedjbri as a likely candidate, the Manchester United player. At the possible level, we have Hamza Rafia and Firas Ben Larbi. And then three possible but unlikely candidates, Wabi Kausri, who we did say was retired, but he has come out of retirement before, so we thought that could be the case here. We had also Mortada Ben Owanes, and then Heikul Chikawi, the third possible but unlikely candidate. Let's see. And actually, this is where we get our surprises. We'll see in section 3, because Hannibal Nedjbri, the likely candidate, not selected. I can only speculate that even though he's on the roster of Man United and his loan to Birmingham ended, he's not getting on the field for Man United. So perhaps not selected here just because he's not seeing enough field time. However, the possible candidate, the first one, Hamza Rafia, who we saw in the midfield earlier, was selected for the final squad. Firas Ben Larbi, though, just for the preliminary squad. No surprise, Wabi Kausri then not selected and retired from international soccer there. So he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad. However, Mortada Ben Owanes, the second possible but unlikely candidate, was selected. Ooh, I made a mistake in my graphics there. Was selected for the final squad there, so a bit of a surprise. And Heikul Chikawi just selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. So we won't look at the well, maybe we'll just review these players in the games, although that position of central attacking midfielder wasn't used in the 4-3-3 formation or the 4-4-2 formation. So the position itself was not used, but some of the players were. I'll just go over it. Rafia coming in as a right midfielder in game 1. That's the first November game against Malawi, the second November game. None of these players getting on the field. The first January game against Mauritania, we do have Achuri, as we saw earlier. No, that's the right forward. He was playing as a left forward, so none of these players on the field, and that's true for both of the January games. None of these players getting starts. Oh, wait a minute. We do have Rafia starting as a left midfielder in the 4-3-3 formation of the last game. So among these players, Rafia getting 2 starts, but none of the others seen as starters. Okay, secondary strikers, we do actually have 2 players coded this way. So neither of them made the squad, though. They were both at the possible level. That's Issam Jabali and Anas Haj Mohammed. And both of them were selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. So Issam Jabali and Anas Haj Mohammed not selected for the squad. Okay, now our final category of forwards. No definite candidates here, actually, but we did have one at the likely level. That was Haytham Jouini. And then one at the possible level, Taha Yassin Kanisi. And then 2 possible but unlikely candidates in Safadine Jaziri and Hamdi Labidi. So let's see who was selected. Haytham Jouini, the likely candidate, was selected for the squad, and so was Kanisi selected for the final squad, the possible candidate. However, the possible but unlikely candidates, Safadine Jaziri and Hamdi Labidi, both of those making the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. Only 2 forwards then selected for the final squad, but we do have a couple of new candidates, and I realize I got to go back to right wing in a minute here because I forgot to introduce the new candidates there. 3 new candidates as forwards, but all of them just selected for the preliminary squad and not the final squad. So we'll just kind of name check them here and see if they show up in the future. The first is Bilal Medri. The second, Yusuf Abdelli. And the third one is actually a returning player, returning from having played in the 2019 African Cup, but then last appearing for the national team in March 2021. We had quite a few of these players coming back from long absences, or not coming back, but being named to the squad at least. This is Firas Chawat. Named to the preliminary squad but not making the final cut. So again, that might mean that he's in the mix and may show up in the future here, but not selected for this squad. Now I'm going to go back and finish the business that no, I'll actually look at these players in the cup and then finish that business with the right forward. So in the first game there against Sao Tome and Principe, it is Jouini starting as the centre forward in that 4-3-3 formation. But in the second game, it is Kanisi alongside Msakni. That was the 4-4-2 formation. Kanisi playing as the right co-forward there. And finally, against Cape Verde, it is Kanisi starting as the centre forward in a 3-man forward line. So Jouini used twice and Kanisi used twice there. Again, that will be relevant to our discussion of starters. And as I said, I have to go back and correct something with the right attacking midfielders / right wingers. And I see that actually I did introduce a new player there, Raki Awani, who only made the preliminary squad. But I didn't introduce the only new player on our list to actually make the final cut, and that is Bassem Sararfi. Bassem Sararfi selected for the final squad, and I'll have to tell you, he's not on. He perhaps should have been on our list because he's a veteran of the World Cup in 2018 and the African Cup, even though he only appeared as a substitute very briefly in the 2018 World Cup in Game 3, and then also in Game 3 for the 2019 African Cup, but at least he subbed in at halftime and played half of the game there. However, he had last played for the national team in October 2019, which explains why he wasn't on our list, and returned after a more than 5-year absence in January 2024. So just for these friendlies, didn't start either of the games, but was subbed in for both of them, Bassem Sarafi. So I will briefly introduce him because he doesn't look like he's going to be a starter. He's actually with his second stint with Club Africain in Tunisia since 2023, having played in Belgium and France, and got his first cap for Tunisia in 2018, amassed 7 caps and 1 goal until his last appearance in October 2019. So he was fairly well ensconced on the team for a couple of years there, and then disappeared for a long time. But now he's back and actually named to the final squad. So Bassem Sarafi there, the additional right attacking midfielder. Okay, that does bring us to the end of part 2, though, or section 2, I should say, now that we've looked at our list and gone through the players that were selected. So we move on to section 3, which begins with kind of a summary of things. Let's look at notable non-selections first. And really just the one here, the only player we had as at the likely or definite level that wasn't selected, and that's Hannibal Mejbri, the attacking midfielder who is on Man United's roster but not really getting on the field, which is too bad because I like him. So I was hoping to see him in this cup, but needs to get on the field for Man United, I guess, in order to be selected for Tunisia. Surprise inclusions include the possible but unlikely attacking midfielder Mortata Ben Ouane. So that was a surprise selection. But there is more news to say about him, because despite being selected, he actually withdrew from the squad for personal reasons. That was, I think, 4 or 5 days after the final squad was announced on January 3rd. He withdrew. And he was replaced by another player at the possible but unlikely level, and that is Seferdine Jaziri. So he had been selected for the preliminary squad, was cut from the squad, didn't make the final squad, but then brought back into the squad to replace Ben Ouane. So both of those players surprises, because they were at the possible but unlikely level, but ultimately both got selected for the final squad. New players is the one I had neglected to mention as a right winger. That is Bassem Sarafi, and again, new only in the sense that he wasn't on our list in part 1 because he'd been off the team for too long, but had played in a couple of cups there, and now brought back into the team for this tournament. So Bassem Sarafi back on the squad. As far as injury updates go, we didn't have any in the in part 1, and we didn't have any players that we knew about in part 2 either. Going through the squad. So we didn't see any players that were not selected due to injury. I did pause there to check into whether Hannibal Mejbri had an injury concern prior to the cup. And no, injury was not the reason he was not selected. He actually did play for Man United a bit more than I thought he did. He got 1 start and then was subbed in a few times, most of those substitutions just for a couple of minutes. So really, I do think it was because he wasn't getting enough field time there. Okay, so that is injuries. Really no injury concerns for Tunisia as far as we know. And now we can go to our spotlight review. We're going to revise our spotlight review based on the new information we have. So let's take a look at what we came up with at the end of part 1, and then make changes to it based on what we have. So Jalal Kadri, the manager, we do think he is, we'll call him a starter because we don't think he'll be dismissed or anything before the Cup. Goalkeepers, though, we did have both goalkeepers, Bashir Ben Said and Eamon Daman, as both potential starters, but now we're revising that to a definite on Ben Said as the goalkeeper. He started the last 4 games, so looks like a definite starter there. So I guess we would consider then Eamon Daman the backup, probably. In central defence, unlike most teams, it's very stable here. Montasar Talbi and Yassine Mariah almost certainly starting there in central defence. Left back, we have Ali Abdi, not necessarily starting as a left back, possibly starting in central defence there, but we have him as a definite starter. But just in case he does replace someone in central defence, we have Ali Malul as a possible starter at left back position. Even that's maybe a bit overstating his likelihood of starting Ali Malul because he's definitely the backup to Ali Abdi there. But we'll leave that in blue as a potential starter. Right back, also a very definite Wajdi Katrida starting at right back. That almost seems certain. So the defense, gotta say, this is the most stable looking defense that I've seen among teams in the African Cup. There, not so much so. Also in central midfield, but not so much so when we get to the forward lines. But the central midfield, very stable. Last time we had Elias Skiri and Aissa Leidouni as definite starters there, and we're sticking with that in the central midfield. We go to left wingers. Any other midfielders, kind of middle of the midfielders that will be added here will mostly be coming from the more attacking midfielders kind of coming back to play in that position. So we'll have a couple of names there of players who we think might be added in the midfield. As we know, they prefer a 4-3-3, which would be kind of 3 central midfielders. But let's move on to left wing. We had Yusuf Nsakni as a definite starter and Ben Romdane as a possible starter, but we're going to remove Ben Romdane from the list. We think it is possible he'll start, but we wouldn't put him as a possible to likely starter at this point, and rather throw our bet behind Yusuf Nsakni being the starter on the left attacking midfield position. There. On the right wing, though, things are far less clear. They've used a variety of players in the position, and no player emerges as someone that we would nominate even as a potential or likely starter there. But we are going to have a couple of special mentions coming up, and maybe those players will fill the position. In the forward position, oh, hang on. Well, we had Hannibal Mejbri as a potential starter. His position is central attacking midfield, even though they don't use that position. We thought he might show up somewhere on the field, but of course he wasn't selected, so we take him off the list. We also weren't bold enough to nominate any forwards at the end of part 1, but now we actually feel fairly certain that it'll be Juini or Kaniti start as the starting forwards, perhaps rotating. Each of them have started 2 of the last 4 games. So it could be a rotating position, or it could be that they're still deciding between the 2 of them. But we do think it'll be one or the other. And now we're going to add a couple of players in the special mention category, which means we're not really sure where they'll be starting. It could be in the central midfield if they have a 3-man midfield, or it could be as the right attacking, kind of the right upper quadrant position. But it is Naeem Sliti and Hamza Rafia. So we nominate those 2 players as potential starters on the field here. So there we have it. Again, very solid in the back. We can be fairly certain of our predictions there. And then up front, a little less so. But now we do have a special treat, which we wouldn't be doing in most of our series podcasts, because the first game has been played, or we know who played in the first game. We can actually review our predictions here. So I'm just going to pause here and prepare for that. And that is what we're going to do. Okay, some pretty interesting stuff here. Things never really go as expected, but some sections did. So let's begin with goalkeeper. It is Ben Said, as expected here, as a starter. Same with central defense, Talbi and Maria, both starting as we expected. The first surprise, though, is Ali Abdi, who we had as a definite starter, not starting the game, but actually Ali Malul, who we had as a potential starter, starting as a left back. To be honest, we thought he might be a starter only if Abdi was kind of replacing someone in central defense. So that is a surprise, I would say. Let's actually change that to a surprise starter for us there. At right back, though, as expected, it was Kishrida starting there, and so no surprise there. We have Elias Skiri. So in central midfield, we expected Skiri and Leidouni, and Skiri did start as expected. However, Leidouni not selected as a starter here, so definitely a surprise there. We were fairly confident about that one. Rather, we have, by the way, it's a 4-3-3 formation, which Tunisia favors, so we expected that. But even the players who came in were not the ones we expected. So we thought perhaps it would be Slitty or Rafia, but in fact, it's Ben Romdane, who actually we took off our list in part one. We should have left him on there because he was playing alongside Skiri as the left midfielder, and on the right midfielder, Ben Slimani. So neither of these are really a big surprise, I would say, although we did, as I said, expect different players, Slitty and Rafia, ahead of them. But again, not a shock there. Yusuf Ntakni as the left attacking midfielder, or I guess the left forward in this 4-3-3 formation. That was what we expected. And on the right wing, we do have the player coded as a right winger, Elias Ashuri, starting. So, no, well, not really a surprise there, because we didn't know who was going to be starting. And because he started the last game, Ashuri, actually he started both games in January, so perhaps we should have predicted him in the first place there. So yes, I'm going to say not a surprise, to be honest. There, let's just leave that as a surprise starter, because frankly we blew it. Central attacking midfielder, well, the position's not used, and no one coded as a central attacking midfielder was given a start. In the forward line, we thought it would be either Giuini or Kanisi. It turned out to be Kanisi as a starter, so that doesn't defy our expectations. However, neither of our special mention players who we thought might be getting a start, Slitty or Rafia, were selected, and Giuini also was only a potential starter. And in fact, we can even look at the substitutes, because 15 minutes into the game, Kanisi was, well, it must be an injury just 15 minutes in. He was subbed out and replaced by Giuini. So I would imagine going forward, Giuini will be the starter, depending on how serious that injury was. I haven't actually seen the game yet. At halftime, we do have the surprise non-starter, Leidouni, coming in at halftime and replacing Ben Romdane. there, and then 2 substitutions towards the end, which we won't get into. So all in all, not too many surprises, because things never really go as planned. Not too many surprises there, and we'll have to see how it is going forward. Anyway, that's as far as we can take you for this 2023 African Cup, but we'll probably be coming back to Tunisia to look at them for the 2025 African Cup, which takes place at the end of 2025. So probably in October or November there, we'll be doing it all over again, looking at Tunisia's players. Hopefully we'll see you then. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.